Thanks for coming, everybody. We really appreciate everyone coming out, and we should have a couple more because I talked with a few people. First thing, I'll be quick because we want to pass the microphone over to Mr. Gregorarz. But first thing is that we got some food for the event, and we're going to be respectful of everyone who is participating in Ramadan and is fasting. So we put it a little bit in the back, a little bit more out of mind, but please feel welcome. And if anyone is taking part in Ramadan, we have halal prepared options to go in plastic containers to take with and eat when the sun is set. So next we have one quick announcement before we start. George, come up here. Nathan, come here as well. So we're really proud to announce just recently we got word that the Real Estate Association has been nominated for an Office of Student Life Student Leadership Award. Hey, can you switch that over? And so we will be attending at the event on the 21st, the Student Leadership Awards. We're in the running for Best Outstanding New Student Organization. So hopefully, there's some tough competition, but hopefully we'll win. We'll keep you all posted. We're pretty excited. So, I don't know. Thank you guys for all your hard work. I really appreciate you. Abe, could you switch back to our beautiful wallpaper? And next, we'll start the floor from Mr. Gregorarz. Michael Gregorarz is the president of the Gregorarz Group. He is a former student of Dr. Singh, many of you may have had in finance here. Put us in touch, and we really appreciate both of them for helping us out. And some fun facts, Mr. Gregorarz leads acquisitions, capital structure, debt origination, and investor relations. They work in multifamily real estate in the Chicago area and managing a portfolio currently around $25 million, which is very impressive. A former Michigan-Dearborn student, and he's generated over $1 million in returns for his investors. Hi, Tyler. And he's been directly involved in the origination, development, and the final disposition for over $100 million worth of real estate. So without further ado, Mr. Gregorarz, the floor is yours. Thank you for helping us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I don't have anything prepared. It's kind of like an open forum. If you have a question, yell it out. I did get some questions from the Real Estate Association, so I'm just going to go one by one. The first thing that they wanted me to talk about was how did I get started in real estate? So I got into real estate when I was a little boy, 13 or 14. I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It changed my mindset, and that's really all you need is a different kind of mindset. So I wanted to buy a building from that age. I went to college here, business school, wanted to buy a building the whole time. Got a degree in finance. When I graduated, I thought, what do you do with a finance degree? You go work for a bank. So I got a job at Bank of America, downtown Chicago, on Bankers Row on LaSalle, and I hated my job. I was going in a cubicle every single day, and I was not having a good time. But the whole time I would go out on the weekends when all my friends were going to football games and drinking, I was walking buildings. So every single weekend I would walk properties. I had found a mentor. We'd walk them together. I knew nothing about the Chicago market. I just knew it was a big city, big opportunity, third largest city in the United States, and I knew I wanted to be there. So about 6 or 7 months in, I found a property. I got it under contract. It was a 4-unit apartment building. I used an FHA loan financing. If anyone doesn't understand anything, feel free to jump in. It requires about less than 5% down, and I purchased the property in June, about 9 years ago now. So that's kind of how I got started and I got into it. As soon as I closed on the building, I moved into one of the apartments. The other tenants covered my rent. I was living rent-free. And I said this process was fun. I was walking buildings, drinking coffee, talking to appraisers, talking to bankers, talking to real estate agents. I had a great time. I walked in, I quit my job that same week. I said, I'm done. I'm just gonna do this full time. So that's kind of how I got started. So I purchased that building about 9 years ago now. It was June 2013. I purchased it for $490,000. This is a real example. less than 25% down, and recently it's been appraised between $900,000 and $1 million. And I haven't really done any work to it. Someone moves out, you paint the walls, update the tiles, and you keep increasing the rent. So it's a real life example of how I got started and what my first deal looked like. How do we do business, and how are our returns generated for investors? So we have a value add strategy. So we look for the ugliest building on the nicest block. So we buy the building that's been managed by the same owner for 30, 40 years. The kitchens are outdated, the bathrooms are falling apart, and that's gold for us. So we go in, we buy the property, we fix it up, and we double or triple the rents. We're working on a property right now in Chicago. We purchased the building, the rents were $700. We just rented our first unit for $1,450. We did about $50,000 worth of work, and the units are flying off the shelves. So we have a construction arm in the company, and that's my business partner, so he does the day-to-day operations on fixing up the bathrooms and the kitchens, and I get the financing from the banks, and I talk to the investors, and I get the money from the investors. So that's kind of our business model and how we run things. What makes a good project in a good location? So I think for the target audience here, I'm assuming that we all want to get involved and started in real estate. My advice to you would be to find a building that you're comfortable living in and collecting rent in for your first property. You don't need to do anything crazy. As long as you feel comfortable going there and collecting rent, the location's going to be good enough. And because of how young everyone here is, you've got time on your side. So buy a building today that everyone tells you overpaid for. Ask me if I overpaid in 15 years. I guarantee you the answer is going to be no. So in terms of location, to be a little more specific, if you're going to a new market, you don't know anything about anything, like I did when I went to Chicago, I like to do the method of copying off of your peers. I know that's not allowed in school, but I like to copy. So for example, Amazon has a team of thousands and thousands of employees, and what does Amazon do? They spend hundreds of thousands of hours with market analysis. So they're gonna figure out where they're gonna put their Whole Foods so that for the next 30 years, the market's gonna get better, the area's gonna get better, and people are gonna go get their Whole Foods. So I'm just gonna buy a building near Whole Foods. It's really that simple. Same concept with Starbucks, same concept with Apple stores, any high-end retailers. You don't have to figure out where the best area is in a market you're not familiar with. You just have to go to someone that does and has it already figured out. So that's a nice little cheat that I like to do. Let's see. Any questions? Any comments? Anything yet? So the FHA is how I purchased. I want to kind of go back to that. How I purchased my first loan. It's called the first-time home buyer. And it gives you the ability to put down a smaller down payment on a property you're buying because it's your first home. So the government incentivizes you to buy a building. Now the FHA, it works for single families, but it also works for buildings that are up to 4 apartments. So you could buy a 2-unit, a 3-unit, or a 4-unit building using this FHA program. Now the down payments are smaller, 2.5%, 5%. They're supposed to help you be able to afford your first building. So what they'll do is they'll take the income from the other units, they're assuming you're gonna live in one of them, and it's gonna help you pay your mortgage. Hopefully you find a deal where if you move in, all the other tenants are paying your mortgage and you don't have to worry about anything. That's what you're really looking for. So if you're just getting started and you say, what do I do? I don't have any money. Go look for FHA buildings, very little down payment. It's pretty simple. Let's see. Investors are the next step when you're raising money. So a lot of people say, Michael, I need money to buy a building. No, you don't need money to buy a building. There's tons of other things you guys have where money's actually the least important thing. I have a list of guys right now that want to give me millions and millions and millions of dollars, and I can't do anything with it because I don't have a deal. So the most important thing is finding a deal. Get on the phone, knock on the doors, and find a deal. You find a good deal, you'll find the money, you'll find the investors. It's simple as that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What percentage
All of my deals are off market.
All of them?
Yes.
Okay.
If it's
Not a single deal was found.
I think I did my first deal ever with investors that was on the market, and I stole the deal. She was in foreclosure. I didn't use a broker. I used the broker representing her. So what happens is this broker, he's a real estate agent, he now is going to get twice the commission for the same amount of work. If I bring in my own agent, they're going to split the commission. I used the same agent, so he said, okay, well, I want to sell to this guy. I'm going to do the same amount of work, get double the money. So he helped me figure out where I need to come in for the price to sell the property. And that was really the only time I bought a building that was on market. Typically, the running joke is if it's on the market, everyone's already looked at it, it's not a deal anymore. But that's okay. If you're buying your first property and you're using the FHA loan and you're engineering the financial aspect of the purchase to 5% down, you're 20 years old, if you hold it for 20 years, it doesn't matter if you're overpaying if it's on the market. Just get started, just get in, take advantage of owning real estate and the cash flow and all the tax benefits that come along with it. So investors. It's not always the best idea to take money from everybody. You want to make sure that you like the people that you're taking money from. You want to make sure that you guys have synergies and that your goals are aligned. In the beginning, I was just taking money from everybody, let's go. And then I learned, investors have questions and they have attitudes and they have different philosophies than I do. And all of our philosophies don't exactly line up. So you want to be very, very, very picky when you're picking who to partner with. Same with bankers. So you're also, you're looking for equity from the investors and you're looking for debt from the bank. So you want to make sure that the bank you're working with is the same, that you're lined up, you have all the same ideas, synergies, and that you're working together, you have a good relationship. You don't want to just jump into something because it's a good opportunity or you think it's a good opportunity. Let's see what else we got here. Yes?
I was wondering, for when you were younger and closer to our age, what did you feel was most beneficial to you in building your credibility to start getting some attention from these potential investors?
So the biggest thing is the experience. So buying a building, number one. You buy a building, you're 20 years old, you buy a 3 or 4 flat, everyone's going to start looking at you differently right away. I know brokers in Chicago that have made tens and hundreds of millions of dollars and they don't own any real estate. And they'll be talking shop in some sort of gathering or some sort of event, and my only question is, what's your portfolio look like? And when they say, well, I broker deals, I understand you broker deals, but what do you own? Because you don't really understand what's going on unless you own something, and unless you got tenants calling you, or you have the management company calling you. So the biggest experience is just buying a building, and that gives you the most credibility. The second thing is aligning yourself with someone of a mentor. So I think it's Robert Kiyosaki said, when you're young, work to learn, don't work to earn. So it's important to gain experience. So maybe take a job that pays less or maybe pays nothing, but you're working for a guy that's been doing it forever and can teach you tons and tons of stuff. So that's kind of what I did. As soon as I quit my job at Bank of America, I got a job for Sean Conlon. He has a TV show or had a TV show, big real estate guy in Chicago. I got a job for another guy, his name was Nick Yasan, Rainey Management, and he owns about 800 apartments. I wasn't getting paid much, but I was learning a lot. I've learned a lot. And then after that, I started buying, my goal was a building a year. So I started buying a building every single year, and now it's kind of my full-time focus. I don't have to learn all this stuff anymore. But so number one, buy a building. If you can't do that, the easiest, best thing to do is to get a mentor or get a job in a position where you're gaining lots of experience. You're working for someone that's, reputable and respected in the area and the community you want to be in. Let's see. Stories, super valuable. My favorite story is when I bought a building on a Friday we closed, and it's a rougher area, part of Chicago. And the next day we had a SWAT team raid one of our tenants that was a gangbanger. That was very scary, but also very cool and fun, now that I look back on it. They busted in, they had a bunch of drugs, a bunch of stuff that was illegal on the property. All the tenants called me, were freaking out, but that's kind of what you want. You want to buy on the outskirts of where where everything's going. If you go to the hottest part of town, you're gonna overpay. If you buy on the fringe of where it's suspect, that's where the deals are. It turned out being a blessing in disguise. They put a restraining order on the guy so we could come back to the building and we didn't have to do an eviction. It was actually worked out really well. But having a 25-person SWAT team raid your building at 5 a.m. in the morning with tenants calling you was a little bit scary. But don't let anything like that deter you. It's just a learning experience, and it ends up being a good thing in the long run. So that's a pretty fun story I had. What makes a good project? So, you know, different projects are good for different people. It kind of comes back to what your investment philosophy is. So everyone has a different investment philosophy. Everyone here is younger, so when you're younger, you can take higher risks. When you're a little bit older, you've got, you know, the less years in life, you want less risky projects. So if you're looking for higher risk, you could go for the buildings that have the gangbangers and need a lot of work. If you're looking for lower risk because you want your nest egg to be safe, you go and buy a Starbucks, like a triple net lease, or you buy an Apple building, or you buy, you know, the most expensive building in Royal Oak, I guess is probably a hot area around here. So it depends on your investment philosophy and who you're partnering with and what they want to get out of the investment. Do they want it? Are they happy with beating inflation or keeping up with inflation? Or do they want to make 30 or 40 or 50% a year? Or do they want to make 100% a year, right? So there's different ways of doing it. I'm strictly an apartment guy. I found that it's been the easiest path, the most stable and boring asset class is definitely apartments. We've all seen what happened to hotels during COVID. That was a higher risk investment, and office space is being destroyed right now. But everyone always needs a place to live. So apartments has been the safest, easiest way for me to get started, really for anyone to get started, especially with the FHA financing. I can't say enough, everyone should buy a building with FHA financing in this room. Yes. Let's see. Anything else? Mindsets. Mindsets are important. We could talk about mindsets a little bit. Like I said, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. My mindset changed. You know, you could be the 4-quadrant employee, you could be self-employed, you could be an investor, or you could be a business owner, I think are the 4. But you could start out being employed for somebody. Like when you graduate, go get a job, get your W-2. That'll help you get financing from a bank. So when you're more bankable in the beginning, when you have a W-2, a steady income, the bank's more willing to lend you money. Right now, if I were to go to the same bank and ask for a loan, they would say, Michael, we can't give you a loan. You have a $120,000 loss from last year. And they don't know that. I mean, they don't understand that it's an accounting loss. Right? So it's not that I lost $120,000 but on paper I did. And what that means is you kind of have to understand the tax code. So, you know, everybody was mad at Trump because he lost $1 billion on his taxes. Well, what you should say is how was he able to achieve a loss? Clearly the guy's got money. So how you do that is the IRS incentivizes you to provide housing for other people. That is the most important thing. Providing housing for other people. There's a huge housing problem in the United States. So what the IRS did is they wrote a tax code that's favorable for people that can provide housing for others. So if you've got the grit to buy a building and rent it out to others, they're going to treat you with favor. So the more housing you provide, the bigger incentives the IRS gives you. It's this magical thing called depreciation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this. You buy a building, the value of the building increases, but on a tax base, it decreases. So you're able to take that decrease and offset it with any gains you might have had. So the more buildings you have, the more decreases you have. Now that kind of starts to flip later on in life when you stop buying buildings. I mean, I know guys in Chicago that only buy buildings to have a loss, and they will overpay. Because if they overpay, they get a bigger write-off. So they'll go in, they'll pay $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 more on a building, it might not make financial sense for me to buy that, but for him, he just needs the write-off. He just needs the loss. So for him, it's a great deal. And it's really difficult to compete against guys like that.
If those guys are investing specifically to take advantage of the depreciation, does that mean they're only buying buildings that are newer than like 27 years or whatever it is?
No. You buy so every building I own is 100 years old. The depreciation schedule restarts every time someone new buys the building. Those guys buy buildings because it's next door. Because I walk to get my coffee and I walk by this building every day and I want to own that building. I want my sign on that building. That's why they buy a building. Mainly because of location or personal things, but they're willing to overpay because it makes sense from an accounting point of view. It might not make sense for everybody, but in that situation, if you know the big shot investor in the neighborhood, and you know he's willing to overpay for that building, you get on the phone, you get the building owner on the phone, and you say, hey, I got a buyer for you. Are you willing to sell your building? Yes, done. You call the next guy, you sell him the building, say, hey, I got this building for you, I know you want it, give me $100,000, deal's yours. Boom, you just made $100,000, one phone call. I know you've got to make 1,000 phone calls before that you put that puzzle together, but it's worth it. So, you can take advantage of these, these guys in the neighborhoods that'll buy anything for any price because of whether it's a tax incentive or whether it's, I walk by this building every day and I need it, kind of thing. So, but yeah, so depreciation, every time you buy a building, it restarts. So you get to get it from fresh. And then also that's a good, what happens is if you've owned a building for long enough, you start making money on it because your depreciation's so low, you can't offset the income. So a lot of guys will sell a building because the depreciation's already run out. I know guys that have owned buildings for 30, 40 years. They've paid, $100,000 and it's worth $2 million now. Their depreciation's gone, but they don't care. They're just collecting rent and they're happy. Another deal that stands out. I've been asked, would you rather be good or would you rather be lucky? I have a story of a guy who's really good at real estate in Chicago. Bought a building for $1 million in the West Loop. If you're familiar with Chicago, West Loop is west of downtown. $1 million building, okay, whatever. He held on to it for a few years, and then a little company called Google came in across the street. Now, did this guy know Google was gonna come? No. Was he that good that he had this insight? No. Did he get lucky? Yes. Now he's getting, for the $1 million he paid, he's getting $40 million offers. And he says, I'm not gonna sell unless it's 50. So would you rather be lucky or good? I don't know, I'd rather be lucky, I guess. Let's see, what else? So does everybody here want to buy a building? Is that, we're thinking about it? Yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so that's a good place to start. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you had the opportunity to skip, the single family, duplex, triplex, and go straight to commercial, would you do it? Or no?
So yeah, what I skipped, I did skip buying single family homes because those are not an investment. And some told you they're an investment, that's not true. It's only an investment if there's cash flow. If you're making money when you sleep, then it's an investment. If you're not making money when you sleep, it's not an investment. Yes, I would skip everything. I wish I could be buying skyscrapers in downtown right now. I don't want to buy these little buildings anymore. I want to go bigger and faster. That's the biggest thing I wish I would have bought more at a younger age, if I could have, right? So yeah, if you have the ability to skip the 3-plexes, the 4-plexes, absolutely. Another thing that happens, so right now my sweet spot's, I'm buying about 15 unit buildings at a time. When you have 1 unit empty on a 4-plex, it's 25% of your revenue that's gone, right? You've got a 2-flat, one's empty, that's 50% of your revenue. So a good way to diversify your risk is by having a 15 unit building. One's empty, you don't even feel it. So yeah, absolutely. There's a lot, and then you have 1 roof over 15 units versus 1 roof over 2. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you judge your price points based on like today's market where it's seller's market,
Yeah, right now, I just got back from Florida. I made an offer on a 4-unit building for $1.5 million. and I was a backup offer. The market is different everywhere you go. In Tampa, 30% increase in market value of your property in 1 year. So I've got it down to a science now where I walk a building, I know what rent I can get from the unit, and I walk it with my partner, who's my GC guy. He tells me this is gonna cost $25,000. I don't even need a pro forma, I don't need to Excel anything. I just know for a fact, I'm gonna buy this for $1 million, I'm gonna put $1 million into it, and it's gonna be worth $3.5 million when I'm done. So I've already got it down to where I could do it on a napkin. Now, when you're getting started, you're gonna wanna do pro formas, you're gonna wanna do your analysis. There is something called paralysis analysis. So you guys are young, you guys can make a mistake, you can overpay, because if you hold it long enough, you won't notice it. So in the beginning, a lot of people that I know that have wanted to get into real estate, they were too focused on the analysis, crunching the numbers. I can crunch the numbers a million different ways. I can make it look like the greatest deal in the world, I can make it look like the worst deal in the world, and you would have no idea. So what's the one thing every single pro forma has in common? Does anyone know what the one thing every single pro forma has in common? They're all wrong, right? Any pro forma you look at, you're looking at projections that are 5 years out, 7 years out. I mean, we don't even know who's gonna go to the Super Bowl next year. You guys are gonna tell me you know what the interest rate's gonna be in 7 years? You're gonna tell me you know what the cap rate's gonna be in 7 years? What the cost of materials is gonna be in 7 years? There's no way. So it's an educated guess at best, right? And after you get a lot of experience, these guys that have been doing it for a long time, it's all about gut feelings. They don't even look at pro formas or anything like that. A lot of your investors are going to be driven based on a pro forma you put in front of them, but what you really have to get good at is defending your pro forma and your point of view. Even though it's going to be wrong, you just have to say, this is why I think it's going to be right. I've been in this market for this long, this is the way it's heading, and this is what I think, and it's just your best guess. And if you can convince the investor, I mean, a lot of these guys have millions and millions of dollars, and it's sitting in a bank account losing 8% to inflation, so they can't write checks fast enough. I get calls from guys all the time, Mike, when's the next deal coming? I'm waiting on the next deal, I want a good deal, I don't want to just buy anything. So it's when you're getting started, don't over focus on the pro forma, on the numbers. Remember, you're getting an FHA loan probably, and you've got a banker underwriting the deal for you. They're gonna make sure that it makes sense. So as long as you could sell it to the banker, half the time you're gonna be okay. And if you've got 3 or 2 other people in the building helping you pay the mortgage, you should be all right. You know, it's really, really, really difficult to lose on a 3 or 4 unit building if you're gonna be living one of the units as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you use a holding company? Do you create LLCs for each property? How is your structure in regard to each particular property? I mean,
Okay.
How do you keep your liability away from
Yes,
yourself?
absolutely. So great question. How do I keep my liability away from myself? When I first started working in Chicago, I got a job at a law firm part-time on the weekends. So I kind of fell in love with law and I got intricated with all the details. So every time I buy a building, I set up a new LLC. Every building is in its own LLC. Now I have a holding company that I own 100% of. My holding company, which is an LLC, let's call it Mike's LLC, owns a percentage of the LLC that is being used to buy the building. So I've got 2 degrees of separation from myself in the building if anything happens. So you want to make sure you have a good lawyer, and the law is different state to state depending on where you're going. In Chicago, I can tell you right now, you're going to want to buy a building in an LLC, and you want to use a separate LLC for every single building, because if you put more than one building into an LLC, you might have some problems where if you're getting sued, they can go after everything that is owned by that LLC. So yeah, and I encourage all my investors to buy into the building LLC with their own LLC as well. Some of them just buy in with their own name or with the trust, but I encourage everyone to have an LLC. Fairly inexpensive depending on what state you're in. Definitely consult with an attorney. Don't take my advice, I'm not an attorney. But that's what I've been doing and what a lot of attorneys have told me. Very, very good question.
So I had a question. So when you're first starting out and buy your first property, you would have to finance it like with your name, right?
Correct.
So how do you transition that from your name to the LLC?
Yeah, so this is it's a good question. The bank doesn't want you to move it into an LLC. At least originally, when you buy it, you have to buy it in your name. Definitely talk to an attorney and don't take my advice. But what I did, I moved it into an LLC. I paid my mortgage every month. I never got a call. No one knocked on my door. No one, as long as the bank's making their money, they're not really gonna look into it. So I would try to keep the buildings out of your name if at all possible. It's a good way to avoid risk. But to buy it first, when you're doing, that's a residential loan. They're underwriting you. That's why you should have a job. You should have a W-2, whether you're making 50 or 100,000 a year. They're gonna make sure that you can afford it, and they're gonna obviously take in some of the income from the tenants, but you're gonna close it in your name. And then if you have a good attorney, he's gonna probably advise you to move it into an LLC. And then if you're doing a refi, you're gonna maybe move it back, or if you're selling it, you can sell it straight with it in the LLC.
How do you structure your deals with the investors? What percent do you get percent?
Yeah, I wish I had a chalkboard. So there's a million ways to structure deals. There's a million different ways. I don't know all the ways. I've seen a lot of different ways. You have an uncle who's a billionaire, you're gonna structure them differently. You're raising money from 15 guys, you're gonna structure it differently. If you've got a big fish that's gonna say, I'm gonna write you $1 million check, you're gonna structure it however that guy wants to structure it. Just get the deal done and then move on. When you've got the experience, you can structure them however you think is best for you, how you can make the most money. But in the beginning, you're gonna have to kind of see what works best for your investors and kind of go along with it. So typically there's gonna be a general partner and there's gonna be a limited partner. So the general partner is the guy that does all the work. That's you. You're making sure there's no empties. You're making sure that the hallways are painted, the grass is cut, there's no tenants, toilets, and termites that are a problem. That's on you. Limited partner is limited. He doesn't do anything except for collects the check. Except maybe you might use him for his balance sheet. The bank says, what are you doing buying a $10 million deal? You can't afford this. Well, my uncle's got a great balance sheet. There you go. So he's gonna be able to dictate terms. Now, if you're raising money from, my first deal I did that I syndicated, I got money from a bunch of college buddies and friends that I've known for a long time. And we all got a little piece of equity. I put in money, I got a larger piece of equity. And how we structured it was very, very even. It's called pari passu, means everybody's kind of equal. I was the manager. We still own the building, and that was a favorable structure to my investors. But we've done very well on it. We bought the building for $640,000, and we refinanced the building less than a year later at a value of $1.2 million. So everybody got their money back within 12 months. That's a good deal. That's a home run deal. You put in $100,000, you get $100,000 back in 12 months. That's what you want. That's a good deal. Even if you get 50% back, that's a good deal. 50% of your money in 1 year. I mean, who would have knew if you bought Twitter a month ago, you would have made that same amount of money, right? But yeah, structuring deals, that kind of comes later. Focus on finding a good deal first, and then everything kind of will fall into place.
You mentioned a lot of your deals or properties you buy are off market. What are some of those strategies you would use to kind of get yourself into a situation where you can capitalize on that?
So the buildings that these people own, they've owned them for 30, 40, 50 years. They're old school. They're not in the metaverse. They probably don't have a cell phone. So you've got to knock on doors. You've got to knock on doors, ring doorbells, call the home phone at 8 p.m., get Joe or Jimmy on the line and say, have you thought about selling? I'd love to buy the building from you directly. Build a relationship. I have guys that bring me deals. and they sit on the phone all day, every day. They probably made a phone call to that building owner 3 or 4 times a year over the last 5 years, and before that person's ready to sell. So it's a long-term game. You might get lucky on your first call, and this guy might be on his deathbed, and the wife doesn't want anything to do with it, so they'll say sure, but that's probably not going to happen. You're going to have to build a relationship with these people. You're going to have to figure out who they are, and you're going to have to build a database, right? You're going to have to say, this is the building, this is the owner, this is the last time I called him. You know, he told me he has a corgi. Next time I call him in 5 months, I'm going to say, how's the corgi doing? How's the building doing? It's still falling apart. I got a guy that'll buy it and fix it for you. So yeah, the off market is, and that's what's the beauty about real estate, and that why it's so much better than Wall Street. On Main Street, it's door to door, and there's opportunities everywhere. On Wall Street, everybody knows the financials. Everyone can look at it. There's no secrets. There's no hidden number to call. It's really difficult to get an advantage. I mean, you say Warren Buffett's good. He knows personally he knows JP Morgan personally. I mean, they call each other all the time. You tell me that's available for everybody to do? No, you can't compete with these guys. So the real estate has got a big advantage because you can get to know your neighbors. You're gonna wanna go door to door. When I was working for Sean Conlon, one of their top agents took me downtown, and he brought in a notebook, and we literally walked from one building to the next, mapped out the street, wrote down the address, maybe there's a phone number, and we would say, we see this is a big opportunity for somebody, the building's falling apart, let's put this on the target list. So now we've created a database by walking the street, going door to door, getting whatever info we can, identifying opportunities where bricks are falling down, and that's how you kind of start. I mean, in a city like in Dearborn, it's a little more spread out, so it's not as congested, so you might have to drive further, whereas in Chicago, you can just walk up and down the blocks. But that's kind of how you start identifying the properties and then building your database and starting to dial those numbers. You have to call, you have to pick up the phone. A lot of people are afraid to pick up the phone, but if you pick up the phone, do 100 calls a week, you'll make $1 million. Anything else? Questions?
Maybe you can talk to them a little bit about educating themselves with appraisers, zoning, ordinance, contractors.
Contractors are a problem, right? We pay them $10,000, they never show up, and they say they're on vacation in Florida. So build a good team. You want a team. It's very important to build a good team. You're going to want to make sure everybody on the team is the same level that you are, an A player. They pick up the phone. They show up to work. They show up sober. They don't take a vacation after one day of work. And that goes for everybody. I just had a call today with an appraiser, and he's trying to figure out what the building's worth. So I said, I could send you my old appraisal. I don't think the value went down. Just absolutely, send it away. Send him the appraisal. I think it's going to be okay. Every single one of those things you mentioned is someone on the team. I mean, the bank picks the appraisal, but you can identify the appraisal companies that are harder to work with. I mean, the contractor is going to be the most difficult, for sure. We're all business people here. We sit behind desks. We work on analysis. We don't know the difference between a 2x4, a 4x4, and how the price went from $10 to $15 in less than a month, and how that impacts building costs. And we're going to the Home Depot. There's no toilets, and we got 15 units trying to finish. There's no toilets. We call around the entire city of Chicago. There's no toilets at Home Depot. So you have to. When you find a toilet, you buy every single toilet that Home Depot has. But I mean, these are things that you don't really think about until you're actually owning the property and doing it. I'd rather pay an extra $200 for a toilet and get shipped in, installed right away, than lose $2,000 in rent for the month because I can't move a tenant. I mean, you have to make decisions like that. But a good contractor will tell you the risks and tell you what's going on. And he goes to Home Depot every single day. So yeah, the best way to find these people is to get referrals, right? You get a mentor, you get a good job at a company that's a big real estate company, and they're gonna know the people to work with, the contractors to use. The banks, so the first bank I ever used, I did the jump from the FHA residential to the commercial. And I didn't know anyone. The guy I was working for said, Mike, call this bank. They've done wonders for me. And it was a personal introduction from a very big client, and I got taken care of. And it was just one quick call from a guy that I met, and he was my mentor, and I was very, very appreciative. And that's kind of how I got my first banking relationship. It wasn't because I just started calling random banks that are on top 10 largest banks in Illinois. It was because I got introduced. So the best way to get all these people on your team is through good referrals and good introductions. And it's very important, because they could sink you really quickly. A $100,000 project could turn into $500,000 really quick. Yeah.
Did you ever experiment with like wholesaling or selling contracts?
Yeah, so that's what you're doing. You're calling a building owner. You're saying, I could buy that building from you right now. I will send you a contract today. Sign the contract. That's wholesale. You can't afford that building. You know the guy that's going to buy the building from you, and then you flip the contract. That's what they call wholesaling. You have a period when you write a contract for due diligence, a bunch of ways to get out of the deal if you can't close on it. But wholesaling is best when you know who the buyer is on the back end. So when you're walking buildings, identifying the buildings, you should also be identifying people that would buy that building. You should know, hey, I'm gonna call Joe, he'll for sure buy this building, doesn't care about price. And then you start building a database of building owners and guys that'll buy that building. And I'm on the list for a lot of people. They'll call me, they'll think I'll pay whatever because it's in my wheelhouse or in my neighborhood, or it needs a ton of work, which I love. And then I'll get a call when they have a building under contract, or you can approach it from being a broker, calling them and saying, hey, I own a brokerage. I'd love to buy the building myself. If you think you'd get more money on the market, I could also list it. So then maybe you get a listing out of it. But a great way to start is through wholesaling, and you shouldn't be afraid, and you will make a lot of money wholesaling. You will make a lot of money. Some of my best friends in Chicago wholesale, and they make over $1 million a year. And even there's no such thing as a bad year in real estate. There's always a good deal to be found. Everyone's always going to pay the rent. Everyone needs a place to live. So wholesaling is a great way to start. I definitely recommend that you explore that option. Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions about
Yeah.
loans. So for the FHA loan, how important is credit in getting that?
Credit is pretty important. They have everything written out. I don't know exactly what it is, but there is a minimum credit score you have to have, and then they'll base your interest rate on your credit too. So the better your credit, the better your interest rate will be. So yeah, if you don't have a certain credit score, you're not going to get an FHA loan.
Do you still take loans personally, or do you work off your revenue?
So what they'll do, I still personally guarantee some of my loans. A lot of loans that I have are personally guaranteed by me. So when you're buying a building, and there's dollar sizes, right? So I'm still in the $1 million range, which is kind of small. Once you get up to 5-10 million, it'll be easier it's called a non-recourse loan. So that's where you don't personally guarantee it. When I'm buying these $1 million buildings that are dilapidated and have almost no revenue, they're gonna ask me to personally guarantee it. But when I'm done rehabbing it, I'll go to what's called Fannie or Freddie, and they have some great terms for non-guaranteed loans. It's a lot more paperwork, the process takes longer, but at the end of the day, it's non-recourse to you. If for whatever reason it doesn't work out, here's the keys, see you later, I get to keep my Ferrari. I don't have a Ferrari, by the way, but.
And so based on your personal guarantee loans, what percent interest do you generate?
My interest rate?
Yeah.
Well, interest rates were really low for a really long time. I just refinanced a loan right now. About 2 weeks ago, it was 3.5% interest rate. I got another refi coming up, 3.9%, but now the banks are telling me everything's going to be 5%. So, you know, you have to be aware where they're moving, where they're going. But I always I have brokers call me all the time, and they say, hey, I got this, you know, great deal. Or bankers call me and say, this is our interest rate we could offer you. I always tell them I'm not interest rate sensitive. You know, the interest rate shouldn't make or break my deal. I'll pay a little bit extra on the interest rate if you give me higher leverage or if you give me a longer loan term. So you can negotiate with banks. You know, typically when you start going commercial, they do 5-year, 7-year, 10-year loans. I know at first it sounds super scary, 5 years, oh my gosh. 5 years takes a while to come up, and you can figure out a lot of stuff in 5 years. So don't be afraid to go commercial. It's the next step after you do a few residential loans. It's much easier to close deals when you're doing commercial, and you know, 5-7 years takes a very long time. So I wouldn't be too scared about it. But I'm not really interest rate sensitive. I know rates have been super low for a super long time. I always make sure that I'm never over leveraged. I never go higher than 75% leverage on a loan. I think that's pretty safe. And yeah, I mean, it's as long as the bank underwrites the deal and they say this works, you're going to be all right. How we doing on time? We've got a few minutes left here. Any?
Do you do any deals with foreclosed properties?
Other than the one example I gave you, you know, there hasn't been too many foreclosures. I mean, since 2008, when there were a ton of foreclosures, now there's no foreclosures almost. And I have relationships with all the servicers that take property management over when the owner defaults, and they're very far and few between. You really can't find something that's being foreclosed on. I guess we're still waiting for some big event to set that off, more foreclosures. And then also, the headlines for foreclosures in Chicago were the hotels. So there's a ton of guys making money buying hotels right now, converting them to apartments downtown Chicago. But in the multifamily space, I didn't have a single tenant not pay me rent during COVID. I had 100%. I had some people move out a little early, but there was an empty apartment, I could re-rent it. But I had no problems collecting rent. Everybody wants a place to go home and sleep. It's very important. And I would love for foreclosures to come across my desk.
When you look for tenants, do you try to find people that are like lower middle class, or is there like a certain?
So it depends on where you're buying, what you're targeting, what you're looking for. I love renting to hipsters. Hipsters go to the outskirts of where the appreciation's going. I don't want to be. So my philosophy is I don't buy. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Lincoln Park in Chicago, but it's like the nicest neighborhood in Lincoln Park in Chicago. Your condo is going to be $1 million. You're going to be able to walk across the street to Dolce & Gabbana or whatever and buy your clothes. That's not where I'm at. I'm at where the artists and the hipsters hang out, on the fringe, where it's affordable, a 2-bedroom apartment for $1,400 with an in-unit washer dryer. One thing, it also depends. I mean, you could do Section 8 housing where you're going to underwrite people completely different, or you're going to do kind of what I do. So what I do is I do a $50 application fee per person over 18. We require a $650 credit score. Well, I don't have a $650 credit score. Well, then you need to find someone to co-sign your apartment for you that does have a $650 credit score. You'll be surprised at the amount of college kids I get that can't get an apartment without their parents co-signing. I can't believe it. You went to college to go be independent and you can't even find a place to live after. It blows my mind. I have so many stories where I need someone to co-sign. Also, because of COVID, I started underwriting where they work a little bit differently as well. So if you work in a restaurant, you might need a cosign, unless you have a lot of savings in your account, because guess what? Apparently the government closed down your restaurant and you're out of work. and that's gonna affect me at collecting your rent. So now, there's certain services and industries you have to be a little more fine on, right? So underwriting the tenant is very, very important. You know, the most difficult thing about owning a building is the management. It's the most important and the most difficult thing. Finding a deal, sure, but once you have that deal, you have to make sure it performs for you and your investors. You have to be sure you're gonna collect the rent. And at the end of the day, it all falls on you. So make sure you underwrite your tenants pretty well.
When did you go, I'm assuming, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but for your first building, did you manage the tenants yourself, or when did you kind of make that transition to a property manager?
So I'm kind of hands-on still in everything. We're starting to hire more people, and I'm getting less, but at the end of the day, because I have personal guarantees on a lot of these properties, I'm writing off on the final tenant decision. But I mean, there's a checklist: 650 credit score, what's your income, how much do you have in your savings account, right? Okay, you got $15,000 in your savings account, that's great. You'd be surprised how many people don't even have $1,000 in their savings account. I tell them, I need to make sure you can pay the first month's rent, right? So you should at least have the first month's rent in your bank account. And a lot of people don't. They'll send me a bank account with $1 in it. What do you want me to do with that? How can I approve you? So I'm still transitioning on taking away, yeah.
So what kind of cash-on-cash return do you look for?
Cash on cash return. So 100%. That's the golden standard. If I don't get 100% of my money in the first year, I'm not that excited. 50%, okay. And the only way to achieve those types of returns are value add, right? You buy an empty lot, you build a big tower, you're gonna get 100% of your money. You buy a building for $1 million, you put 100,000 into it, it's worth $2 million, that's over 100% return. So, but then like I said, it depends on your investment philosophy, your appetite for risk. A lot of guys are okay with a 5% cash on cash return, you know, but they want a safe, stable investment where they're already buying something done that's rehab, that's fully at capacity on the rent roll. So for me, I'm still pretty young. I want 100% within 12 months or less. And that's typically done with a refinance. So you put on more debt because your income can cover it. And then you keep the building. I haven't sold anything I bought. I have the Warren Buffett idea of when you're buying something, pretend you want to own it forever. The stock market closes tomorrow and I can't sell, I'm okay holding this piece of property. That's kind of what I think about my buildings. I think we'll probably sell our first building in 2026, but we'll see.
What has been one of your biggest learning experiences throughout your time doing this?
My biggest learning experience was when I put a deal together, and so I have a list of investors. I think there are 50 people on this list. I'll put a deal together, put the offering memorandum together, I'll send it out. I did this on a deal a few years ago, and I get a call within 5 minutes of this thing going out from a guy I've never talked to. He said, I just got your email, I'm interested. I want to meet you for lunch. Sure. Met him for lunch, had us sit down, bought me a great steak lunch. He brought one of his partners, he's a lawyer, brought a partner from his law firm. Had about an hour lunch, and they said, here's a check for 100,000, here's a check for 100,000. Didn't talk to that guy again for a year. I invited him to lunch a year later, and I said, you know, here's your return. He said, what do you mean my return? I go, you remember when you invested money with me? Oh yeah, I forgot, great, sweet. So how's the golf game, Mike? That blew my mind. Some guy's gonna give me 100,000 and never call me, never ask me anything, and I couldn't believe it. I still have investors I haven't met that live in California, in Florida. I send them a check to their mailbox. And the guy's like, oh, my sister's in Europe, she'll get it in a month. Oh, okay. So it just kind of blows my mind, just the amount of money out there that's looking for a home. I mean, these guys have so much money, they could care less about $100,000. So it's, like I said, it's really about the deal, and then defending the deal and the presentation of the deal to the investor, that's the most important. And you get a free steak dinner out of it too.
For the most part, how do you meet these investors? Is it through networking? Is it through firms?
Yeah, so it starts out friends and family. So my first group of investors, some college buddies, some friends, one of them became a doctor. He started introducing me to other doctors. One guy had a really great return. Your investors become your cheerleaders, kind of a thing. So if you do well by them, they'll introduce you to other potential investors. Title companies, title companies know every single closing that's going on in the city, everybody that's buying it, everybody that's selling it. They've got a huge network. You can tap into those guys. It's really about word of mouth and going to conferences, going and networking. But lawyers, doctors, guys that play golf in Naples for a living, that's where you want to go. That's where you want to hang out. That's who you want to talk to. But start with friends and family, and then it'll kind of word of mouth grow by itself.
And usually, how many investors do you have involved in one property?
So right now, my sweet spot is $1 million raise. So if I'm buying a building, I typically will raise $1 million, and I require a minimum investment of $100,000. So I'll typically have 5, 6, 7 investors in a deal, not including myself, my business partner, and my family, because they want a slice as well. But typically, then you get into the accredited investor category. I don't know if anyone's aware of the accredited investor category. I was not when I graduated. It's actually pretty important. So people who are accredited investors, they get access to deals that people who are not accredited get to. And basically, you just need a minimum net worth. I think it's $5 million or $10 million. And once you're that, you're considered an accredited investor. And when they created that law, they wanted to make sure that only people that were educated investors were making investments outside of Wall Street, and they did it to protect people who were not educated. But really what it did, it prevented people from wanting to make good investments that didn't have a high net worth, and made it easier for guys who were super rich to do deals. So that's another obstacle you have to because every time you do a deal, you have to go through the SEC. You either file it with the SEC or you don't file it with the SEC. Filing with the SEC costs $100,000. Unless you have a huge deal, it's not worth it. If you're only buying a $100,000 building, you probably shouldn't be filing with the SEC for $100,000. So you have to figure out with a lawyer on how to make sure you do everything the right way and do all the correct disclosures. But your friends and family are not going to be accredited investors, so typically. But if you find a good deal and it's small, you shouldn't have a problem getting the investors you need. When we're just reaching out, just like the guys that are wholesaling, you got to pick up the phone and call, right? You got to pick up the phone and call if you want to find an investor. If you have a good deal, the money will come.
We had a question on cash multiple earlier. I was just wondering which metric cash on cash, which metric stands out most to you, and which one do you value most?
I value how fast am I going to get my money back and in the shortest period of time. So the professor will probably say IRR, time value of money. I think there's a whole semester about that we learned here. Super important. So for me, I say, can I get 100% of my money back in a year? Great deal. But for a sophisticated investor, it's all about IRR. And they're gonna like to see 15 to 20% IRR depending on the deal. If it's value added, it should be 20%, and it varies. But IRR, internal rate of return, is the most important when you're dealing with a sophisticated investor. So I would definitely pay attention to that when you're in class if you're learning about it. Cash on cash, multiple equity. I mean, there's tons of different ways to analyze a deal, and every investor has their own thing they like to look at. So you have to be able to go off of anything on the list that they might throw at you. Anything else? I think my time's up. All right, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you for having me. If you have any questions, you have my name, first name, last name. Add me on LinkedIn. Shoot me an email. If you want my cell phone number, come see me. I'll give you my cell phone number. If you want to come to Chicago and you want a tour, come on over. I'll give you a tour. I work with the company. They have internships available. Reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm an open book, and I love helping out guys, and I love when people buy buildings, and when we all buy buildings together, it's fun. So appreciate you guys having me, and let me know if you need anything. Thank you.